Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mackie.
Awesome, well done. On WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio. On www.revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio, so jump in the chat room if you can. This is show number 349.
940 and 300. 100.
Wow, awesome. It's on air, online, line. And it's on your smart device too. So grab an app to listen from anywhere or listen at home on a Gray's Tabletop Digital Radio. If you missed Solaris' show with Lindsay, I was listening to it before our show. Pardon me. It was really cool. It really was cool. She has great guests, fantastic guests, in fact. And you should jump into the archives. So you need $5.95 a month to get access to the station's archives, and you can catch her shows and all the shows, even our shows as well. All the other host shows are all available to download in MP3 format. So you can listen when you want to, right? So we'll still do our broadcast on time every week, but you get to listen when you feel it's appropriate for you. I love that. What a great place we live in when that happens. Mackie and I, we both acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Where I live, it's the Darkinjung people, and where Mackie lives, it's the
Rock people.
And we pay our respects to elders past, present and future. And let us remember that beneath our houses, the concrete rows, buildings and everything that we've put on here, there are lands beneath that which have had stories passed down for at least 240,000 generations. And that's something else when you think about that. We can't say that, can we? We can't say that we've admired the land, looked after the land as custodians, and respected it and the animals on it at all. Not even in the slightest can we say that we've done that. So we should have the greatest respect for them, the true custodians of the lands, wherever you are. Mackie, how are you?
I'm good, my friend. It's been an interesting week, of course. Every week is interesting for different reasons, obviously. And thank you for acknowledging the original people. I think we should spend a second thinking about the original people everywhere. In fact, the problem, of course, is who are the original people. Because we don't really know that anymore. I mean, in Australia, there may have been as many as 6 separate migration waves coming up, or down rather, if you look at the map that way, from the north into Australia, always displacing the previous population. The original people in Japan, the Ainu, were in fact Caucasian. Yeah, that's craziness, right? And then you've got other original people, like the First Nation tribes in the Americas, right? The Mayan, the Aztec, the Olmec cultures, some of whom had been displaced before the Europeans ever got there. Then you've got the Europeans themselves. Massive population displacement. So it becomes difficult to know, Dave, I'll be honest with you, who the original people really are. I mean, you really have to go deep into prehistory to understand it. And it's incumbent upon us to respect everybody equally, right? I mean, if somebody has been here, like the Aboriginal culture stretches back, tens of thousands of years in Australia. Now, is it all the same Aboriginal tribes and bloodlines? No, it is not. So it is not one continuous a settlement, if you will, of the continent, but rather a wave-like pattern that Australia has experienced over the past few tens of thousands of years. You gotta say it again to appreciate it. Tens of thousands of years. When we're tracing our culture back, that's a lot better, Dave. We're tracing our culture back, for better or for worse, into Mesopotamia, the land of the Euphrates and Tigris to some extent, I guess. Some 10,000 years ago. You can stretch it back that far if you really wanted to, and even there's some older, I guess, artifacts and sites, of course. But that's a fair timeline. But what happened before that, Dave? What happened before that? And this is really the funny thing. It's something that the Aborigines call the dream time, right? The dream time before this time. So it's a really interesting concept, and I urge all our listeners to maybe look at what it means for themselves as well. So some people, and in fact the Native Americans, or some of the tribes anyway, they said we dream a life, excuse me, and we live a dream. We dream a life and we live a dream. It sort of hooks into the dream time concept to some extent. A lot of cultures in the past, and even some still surviving to this day, believe that this, our life, is in fact not it. This is the dream. And we in fact wake to live in our dreams, the actual life that we should be living. So look, it becomes very, very controversial, let's say. What is completely beyond controversy, though, my friend, is the tragedy that has befallen specifically California. We're talking in excess of 12,000 houses, homes destroyed by fire. 12,000, not 12 or 100 or even 1,000 homes. We're talking 12,000 homes. And the official death toll now stands at 70, I think, 1 or 2, with another 1,200 people still missing. Now, the president said that it's mismanagement of the forest. I listened to
people should rake their backyards.
Yeah, because they'll make a difference. I listened to an interview with the head of the fire department for California, and I can't remember his name, but he said, "Look, we had an 8-year drought. We had record heat waves." Horrible winds. I mean, the weather hasn't been on our side. I mean, these are, the perfect conditions for a horrific firestorm. And he says, look, forest management is clearly not the only thing to blame here. And I think again, Dave, this is going to touch on a couple of things. Is the climate changing? I'm firmly in the camp of, yes, it is changing. I'm not too sure what's causing it. Is human intervention possible? Yeah, sure. This could be the Anthropocentric age. So we are changing the Earth, the face of the Earth. It's definitely possible. I mean, we're producing a lot of emissions, and certainly we kicked off a process. Even if we're only a small contributor to the process itself, now we kicked it off, and I'm talking about the release of greenhouse gases from places like the tundras, the permafrost regions, which are now melting. Yeah. So did we kick it off? Yeah, quite conceivably, but we are now, we were maybe the domino that started it, but clearly it's now completely spun out of our control, and no matter what we do, in my honest opinion, it's going to be completely irrelevant. Having said all of that, it goes to show that the official line is, these fires are the result of bad forest management. It's nice to blame something. It's nice to have a scapegoat, because that's something we can fix.
I've got the warm and fuzzies with that. You've solved it. Thank you.
Huh? Hey, dude, that's what I'm here for, right? I solve problems. That's what they call me the cleaner.
All right.
No, but the problem, of course, is, I mean, it's nice and neat. It's something we can control. It's something we can understand as well. Or someone mismanaged something. I get it. It's someone's fault. Awesome. Or even a group of people or whatever, an institution, doesn't really matter. The harder thing to realize, of course, is that it isn't. entirely bad management. It is just the time we're living in, and then maybe the administration is happy to deny that the climate is changing. Again, I'm not saying that human beings are entirely responsible for what's happening, because we know the climate has changed in the past.
Just park the cause. Park the cause and stop arguing, right? Like, that's what we're saying.
Yeah, 100%.
We know it's changing. That's a good start.
It is. But look, we can even let's be more radical, Dave. Let's be more radical, right? I grew up in Germany near the Eifel Mountains. The Eifel Mountains. I don't know, but maybe 4,000 or 5,000 meters high, something like that. I mean, they're good-sized mountains, right? They're proper mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to have a lot of excursions into the Eifel. You know, with our school, you know, we had like overnight camps, even just day trips. It's something called the Dragons Rock, Drachenfels, and things like that. Anyway, my point is that I found a lot of maritime fossils in the Eifel. I mean, buckets.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about change here, right? The Eifel, like the mountain range in Germany, was once at the bottom of the ocean at some point in the dim and distant past. I mean, long enough to have produced some, you know, maritime fossils, I guess, right? My point, though, is that this change is not something we should deny, because it is so obviously happening or has happened in the past. Let's stop wasting our time arguing if something is changing. All right, let's just do a full stop, end of argument. Are things changing? Yes, things are changing. Should we be prepared and do something?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we should be prepared, and yes, we should do something, right? I'll get to a couple of specifics in a second. Am I arguing what caused it? No, because it's pointless, okay? Even if human beings had caused it, let's say they did, right? I'm arguing. It's just a hypothetical here, right? So no hate, please. Let's say human beings are responsible. I think they might be as the first domino, at least.
Like a precursor.
I think,
yeah.
Like a precursor, yeah, sure, whatever, right? But I think we have now reached a point, right, where it is completely irrelevant how it started. The question is, can we be prepared for what's coming, and can we stop it? So if we cannot stop it, which I don't think we can, because it's just. I mean, we just don't understand all the angles. We just don't, right? I mean, all the modeling. It is like it's too complicated. We don't understand all of it, and in fact, things are moving a lot faster than our models predicted. Blah blah blah, all that stuff. So okay, well, hopefully we can make some small change or even big change. I mean, if we could stop it, awesome. Let's stop it today. Let's do that, right? Awesome. I'm in it. I'm in it. Like, feet first, I'll jump in.
I've got something for you. I think one of the other things we have to determine is what are the outcomes going to be?
Yes, bingo, right? So that's my second point. You're 100% correct. So we have to be prepared for what is coming. So we already know that the Pacific Island nations are disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they disappearing? Oh, well, everybody's getting fatter, so the islands are being pushed underwater by the collective weight of the people. That's what happened, Dave, right? That's the thing. No, it's not what's happening. What's happening is that the sea levels are in fact rising, but that alone is not enough. What that though causes are more severe waves, tsunamis, and other weather systems, which then wash over the islands, and eventually, if the water level rises enough, the islands will be underwater. Maybe not a lot underwater, but enough underwater not to be livable anymore.
You also have a freshwater water table problem. As the sea level rises, the water table is non-existent. There's no longer a fresh water source on the island.
That is a huge problem. You're absolutely 100% correct, my friend. That is a massive issue. So,
and crops won't grow.
Let's say, okay, so the crops, it's salt. I mean, this is what the Romans did when they conquered cities they didn't like. Carthage, they razed to the ground and they salted the earth. Nothing grows there, right? That's just what they did.
But what have they done for
Salt Lake City, right? What? Aqueducts? But the thing is that these Pacific Island nations, and there's a whole bunch of them, by the way, Micronesia, you know, you might have heard of them. Kiribati has been in the press recently. They have people. There are hundreds of thousands of people that need in your home. So, in my opinion, again, this is just shock jock Mackie speaking. Shock jock. We should apportion a part of Australia, be it islands or coastline or whatever it is, because we have a lot of it. So we've got the size of the continental United States. That is the size of Australia. The size of the United States, continental United States. You can throw in Hawaii as well if you want. And we have 26 million people. 26 million people. If there's one thing we have oodles of, it's space. We have oodles and oodles of space. If you're not familiar with the technical term of an oodle, that's a lot. Okay, an oodle is signifying a lot. So it's a very scientific term. It's I won't get into it because it's be too boring and dry.
It's clearly a multiple of the Planck length anyway, so don't worry about that.
So that's a truism if I've ever heard one. but yeah, look, that's what it's so. Why doesn't Australia do this? Because Australia cannot even bring itself, the government I'm talking about, to bring children from an offshore detention center into Australia for medical treatment. That's who we are now. That's who we are as Australians. We have decided that's who we are. We will now ignore the plight of refugees. And look, I'm not here to judge whether or not they're actual refugees. All I know is these people ran away from wherever they were and tried to get to Australia. Because in my opinion, you only run away from somewhere if it's really bad. If it's really bad, you run away. Otherwise, why? We're lazy. People are lazy. They don't want to do stuff. We want to stay where we are. We're sedentary for, like almost 5,000 years now. I'm going to sit here. I got bread. I'll sit down. Thank you very much. So they ran away from somewhere. Are they all terrorists? Highly unlikely. You have a better chance of being hit by lightning while a black mamba strikes you in the eye as a redback spider bites you on the nose than being killed in a terrorist attack. I'm not saying terrorist attacks are good. They're horrible. They shouldn't happen. They should all be stomped into the ground and forgotten about as quickly as we can. I'm talking about the terrorists here. But they do happen, right? And they're regrettable. But you have to put everything into perspective. So there are a few hundred people, on offshore detention. The likelihood of any of them being terrorists is vanishingly small. And the reason, by the way, is not to stop the terrorists that we put them there. The reason is to stop the boats, and we stop the boats because we don't want anyone dying at sea. So this is a completely humanitarian initiative we're undertaking here, right? So we're stopping the boats so nobody dies by trying to cross the.
But we
the
won't
straits.
treat their children with medical treatment.
No. Now you're going. It's just. One bridge too far, Dave. You're crazy talking about. Right? You're crazy talking. So that's as a people. I mean, I'm sorry, but because we are because in Australia you actually have to vote. Okay, and I know in America you don't. Other countries in Australia you must vote. If you do not vote, they can fine you. They can even throw you in jail. So you have to vote. If you throw your vote away, well, that's right. You can do that. But my point is, we all voted. We all voted. We have to vote. Have we all been, bamboozled? Well, no, I don't think so. But having said that again, we don't have a choice in Australia because they're all Muppets. They're all Muppets. They're sock puppets, Muppets. I don't care what you call them. There's no choice for Australians to vote. So somebody should stand up and try to change something. I wanted to, much to my chagrin. I found out I cannot because I hold 2 passports, and because I hold 2 passports, I cannot sit in Parliament. So Mackie, out. Exit stage left. Thank you very much. Now, be that as it may, somebody out there should do something about it. Start a new party. Do something. Change it. Australia we have to get a different direction. Australia, right? It has to go differently for us. But the point I'm trying to make here is change is happening. People are moving, and we should take the Pacific Island nation into Australia. We allot them some area, maybe some kind of semi-autonomous zone like the ACT. Which is the Australian Capital Territory. I mean, we've got territories, we've got states, right? We even have protectorates, if you didn't know that. There's some islands that, are protectorates. And there's some other areas that are under management for us, where we've got like governors, like the, island chains and whatnot. So why can't we take the Pacific population, which is threatened with extinction here? Because you cannot live on an island that's underwater. Not good living. Not good living. And put them somewhere up here. I mean, we have space. That's my point. That's why I mentioned the Manus people, right? We have Dave, come on. What? Am I crazy?
Sure, why not? Look, you make a great
Clearly,
point.
I'm crazy because I'm talking to myself because Dave isn't here. So, no, but look, guys and girls, we really should. I don't know.
I realized I was muted then.
Okay, sorry. So we've got Omega Logos. He says he's an Aussie. He doesn't vote, and they try and find me, as you know, and get away with it. Now, Omega Logos, if you've got a loophole, I'd like to know about it. I don't know about it.
Good luck with that.
I mean, it's a medical thing. I mean, if you explain to me why you get away with not voting, I'd love to know. I have not been able to do that, and I wouldn't want to either, because I'm taking responsibility. So I vote my conscience. I vote for the candidate and the policies, right? If I'm the only one voting for the guy or the girl, well, so be it. But at least I had my say. I'm curious to understand, though, Omega, how you do not have to vote. So in Australia, everybody has to vote, as far as I'm concerned, until you tell me how that is not the case for you specifically. All right, and sorry, what I just did, I spoke to the chat room. In case you're listening to YouTube, yes, I can now.
Good.
Well,
you can now.
Yeah, but I think now, yeah. I'm speaking to the chat room, and so here's my invitation to everybody listening, unless it's on YouTube, which means, you know, I'm in your past. Right? Maybe even 100 years in your past. But yeah, if you're listening live, or you have an intention of listening live, please go ahead and come to the chat room. It's awesome. There's always really good conversations in the chat room. We try to throw into the chat room as much as we can, especially if it's on topic, right? And there's usually a pretty good interaction. So thank you, Omega, for your contribution. I would like to understand, though, and I will share it with our listenership, how you managed to avoid having to vote in Australia. So why don't we do it? Because we are just where we are, but we should be doing it, Dave. My point is, we should be letting people into Australia because their home is being flooded. Dave, if your neighbor's house burned down or was flooded, would you go and extend a helping hand?
Completely.
I would think so, right? I mean, that's what you do. Ah, thank you. Okay, I thought so. Okay, so thank you, Omega, for sharing. What Omega has just shared with me, and the way he gets away with not voting, is he is legally insane. Well, in that case, yes, you get away. In fact, they won't let you vote. Okay, they're not gonna let you vote.
That has a whole bunch of legal ramifications, but you know, good on you, Omega. That's fine.
Yeah, okay, whatever works, man. Whatever works.
Yeah, all I want to say in respect to that is that if you happen to live in the USA and you didn't vote, don't complain. Because you didn't have your say in the voting system, therefore you extinguish your right to complain about the outcome. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. You want to complain? Vote next time. And whichever way it goes, you can complain whether it worked or didn't work. That's what we're saying. So just taking this back, because we're still on the climate change thing, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. Where I've heard of directed energy weapons. I've heard of that. There's a lot of that going around in the discussions. Look, it's quite possible. Maybe, right? Foreign power has the ability to utilize a weapon that just heats everything up, but you might feel it too, yeah? So if you're not feeling that heat rise or that intensity of energy yourself, then maybe it's not happening. Just saying. I've seen, and Mackie and I, you know, we live in Australia where the bushfire with the trees that actually contain an explosive fuel. The oil in the trees is actually an accelerant. So the gum trees that you now have all throughout the US, and specifically in California, those trees will catch fire, but they don't die as a result of being burned. In fact, they use that to procreate. That's one of the tools that they have up their sleeve. It's sort of bred into them, I suspect. And the trees, the seeds germinate upon being incinerated. I didn't make this stuff up, right? So I've seen cars and cars and cars being burned without the trees being touched. I've seen houses to house to house to house because of ember storms. They all lit up and were all burnt miles in front of the actual fire front. Where the fire front was extinguished, the ember storm, that's where the wind, it makes its own weather pattern, and the wind has like embers coming off the flames, and it sets fire to everything in front of it. It's not even like the flame didn't jump across the freeway, you know. The ember storm just lit the other stuff up on the other side. It can be as hot as, you know, 700 degrees in the path of the fire, and everything catches on fire. So we've got plans of being able to deal with this fire risk. We have sprinklers on our roofs. We block up the gutters, you know, the rain gutters on your house. We block them up, fill them up with water, so when the embers, you know, are flown around by the wind, they don't go up under the roof tiles and set fire to the inside of your roof cavity, incinerating your house. Plus, we have more restrictions on the materials that we use. We don't just build our entire house out of pine, because straw, yeah, or cedar for that matter. We don't shingle the outside. We have ceramic tiles for the roof or metal roofs. We don't have shingle roofs, and, you know, wooden shingle roofs. So look, we have different materials, and we still have problem with fire. Fire still engulfs, you know, goes through our bushland, and, you know, around me I've got 40-meter tall gum trees. I'm surrounded by an explosive inferno. In fact, it's, you know, categorized by the insurance company as an extreme fire risk, not just a fire risk. It's like, imagine likening this to a flood risk. Oh, is your house a flood risk? And the, you know, person nervously answers, yeah, maybe it is. Oh, look, the computer says extreme flood risk, not just a normal flood risk. Think about what that would mean. So that's what I have to deal with, right? So my house is made out of concrete. Concrete. There's no wood in the surrounding structure. In fact, the whole house is made out of steel. And I've got a steel roof, and I've got, you know, concrete cladding around the outside, and even the subfloor is made of concrete. So even embers can't come up and burn anything. So there's ways to being able to deal with it. Unfortunately, you just end up, you're going to be in a situation because of the climate changing and the sun being hot. And, you know, we've just another note, we have on our weather, they analyze the amount of growth of vegetation based on any rain that you might have received, because they can tell now, because the regenerated vegetation has a different light frequency when you're, you know, reflective light. So they have satellites that are looking at the amount of regrowth of vegetation, and then they can say this is fresh vegetation is more than likely going to, because of our trees, you know, perpetually giving off bark and giving off leaves and dropping leaves all the time. We know that in so many months' time, that amount of vegetation is going to be on the floor for fuel. So in Australia too, we also have fuel reduction burns, where the government or the local council, depending on where you are, burns intentionally the forests to bring the fuel load down. And does it work? Yeah, it does. It slows the fire up. You might only get a canopy fire. You won't get a ground fire then, because they don't set fire to the canopy, just the ground material. And at least it brings down the fire risk for that season. Now, we're all like veterans of bushfire in Australia. When I see that now there's, you know, not biannual, twice yearly fire that occurs in California, I think you guys need to step it up. A lot of our bushfire fighters went over there for this season to teach you guys how to deal with the gum tree fire. And here, if we have a fire, just last point, if we have a fire that is coming from, the wind is coming from the west, say, right? And the fire will make a long, thin line towards the east. if you just follow me, right? If there's a 90-degree turn of that wind, now instead of having a long thin line, now you've got a really wide fire front. And that's the kind of thing you've got to mitigate, understanding the weather pattern, not just the fire pattern. Look, it all makes sense. But in the end, I can't confirm or nor deny without, any measurements whether there's, and I'm answering some questions here, Mackie, that have come up with me and our listeners, and that is, are directed energy weapons being used? I can't say yes or no, but to me it looks like regular fire. All of the imagery that I've seen looks like normal fire, and unless you had an instrument that proved there was an extra energy being absorbed by your metering tool, then I have to say I doubt that it's directed energy weapons. I'd like to think there was directed energy weapons, because wouldn't you be using it already?
That's cool. No.
It'd be cool.
No,
It'd be cool to have them.
Yeah, look, it is. It's horrific, but cool. I'm shocked and horrified. No, but the thing is, that's Marge Simpson, in case you're wondering. But the point is that you have to ask yourself, well, what's the point? The point is, what's the point? So you destroy the Town of Paradise, whichever player, we can suppose that somebody has those. To have those types of high energy weapons, clearly you have to be space-based, and not everybody has got the capacity to put satellites into orbit or control satellites in orbit or whatever the case may be. So let's say
it's like I'm going to make this up. Right? That's it.
Yeah. So nation player X or corporation Y decide to burn Paradise to a cinder. Why is the question? Why do that? Unless someone is being held to ransom, and this is the first like Dr. Evil type thing. I'll blow up Paris. Nobody ever picks Rome. Everybody picks Paris.
My little finger is extended and put to the side of my mouth, Mackie.
There you go. And I'm stroking my white cat. But the thing is, it's motive and payoff. There's no payoff in the Town of Paradise to cinder. So I'm with Dave on this one, 100%. These are natural fires, and they're speaking of a larger truth, as we mentioned earlier, which is climate change. I'm not debating climate change. All right, it is changing. I'm so aware of this because I know how much Australia has changed since I moved here 30 years ago. I know how much hotter it has gotten, and how much hotter it'll get yet. And there's also a shift in weather patterns across the months. So the summer has shifted, and all the other months, winter months, they've also shifted. Yeah. So yeah, and it is. And these fires are going to happen more and more often. It's just what's going to happen. You can do as much back burning as you want. And I saw some really, and I think the Solaris shared some of those videos of people that are driving through the firestorm in California.
Yep.
I didn't realize just how bad it was. There's a lady that's driving, and she's driving through a couple of tunnels. But as she drives through these, I can only call them firestorms. You see ambers flying through the air, smoke. There's fire in the distance. But it's really the ambers that are hitting everything, and then cars reversing, trying to get out of it. And then the area it covers is vast, and the heat that these firestorms generate must be enormous. Yeah. And the ambers are everywhere, right? But not only that, if you have fire that covers that much area, there's a distinct lack of oxygen. If you don't get burned to death, if the heat doesn't do you in, a lack of oxygen will. Right, and this is. I saw it and I go, oh my God, this is a horrific scenario, which, in my opinion, we're gonna see play out a lot more going forward. And again, I want to say, go ahead,
Mackie. If you were Nostradamus writing your quatrains and looking into the future, and you managed to, with your crystal ball or whatever method you used, get a vision of what that was, you could say hell on earth, right?
Oh, look up
from the perspective of what it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something to take note of.
Yeah, I agree. You're absolutely right. The thing though is you don't have to have a crystal ball to predict what's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do know is I want to quickly repeat the stats that we mentioned 40 minutes ago. 12 in excess, almost 13,000, in excess of 12,000 homes, almost 13,000 homes. Excuse me, were destroyed, burned to the ground. 13,000. We know that 72 people have been killed, and we know that another 1,200 are missing. We're talking about a first world nation. We're talking about the United States of America, right? It was arguably one of the most powerful and wealthiest nations on the planet. Imagine the same kind of scenario in underprivileged or underdeveloped nations. The death toll would be beyond belief. First of all, there'd be no forest management. Okay, if there's no management, it's a forest. What do you manage it for? It's a forest. It grows. What are you going to do? And the houses would be of inferior quality, I'm sure. They'd be all made of extremely flammable material. And people wouldn't be able to get out, because they probably don't own their own transport. Talk about high-speed transport like cars and such.
Yeah.
So when these kinds of disasters hit undeveloped or underdeveloped nations, the outcome will be a lot worse, a lot more horrific. Let's just take a step back and understand this. What happened in the States over the last couple of weeks was unbelievable and horrific, but it was the first world nation where it happened. It is the number one nation in the world, and the outcome was still horrific. Dave, we are looking at some seriously bad times going forward. Okay, I want to leave everybody with that cheery thought.
Oh, that's awesome. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to tell everyone something really cool that I was listening to this week, and I know that Mekki knows this, so I'm just going to quickly plow through it. And that is, we talk about the Planck length a lot, which is the minimum distance anything can be from something else in this universe. Yeah? Just putting that down as a ground level. Now, there's also, because of the Planck length, there's a frequency and in which everything gives off an energy, for instance. So humans give off infrared heat, and we can see that through thermal imaging, which is really cool. Even if you put a plastic bag, like a garbage bag, over you, you can still see, because of the energy being emitted that passes straight through a plastic bag, for instance. And you can still clearly see the person inside it. And not just they're a blob, but you can make detail out as if the bag is infrared transparent. Let's put it that way. But what happens is, if you turn up the temperature, the frequency of the emitted EM spectrum gets smaller and smaller and smaller until, and I'll tell you how hot this is after I tell you the phrase around this, and it's called the Planck temperature limit. After which, it's no longer a temperature anymore. It isn't. You can't call it a temperature because there isn't. It's no longer. It's gone past hot. It's gone past very hot in crazy hot. It's the hottest. It's gone past the hottest thing that could ever be made anywhere in the entire universe, and now it's one step further, and it's no longer a temperature. You can't measure it with anything because it wouldn't exist, right? So when the frequency of energy output wavelengths equals that of the Planck length, you can call it the Planck temperature limit. But the number is so vastly big that I can describe it maybe another way, and that is 1.41 times 10 to the 32. So that means it's got 33 zeros after it, and that's in Kelvin. Now, if anyone out there is interested in knowing whether that's hot, saying, well, is that Kelvin, Fahrenheit, or Celsius? It doesn't matter. It no longer matters when we've got a number that's as big as 141,000 billion, if you know what I'm saying. But that's how hot
that's
something
pretty big, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's a lot of zeros. But that's how big, how hot something has to be able to have reached the Planck temperature limit because of the wavelength it's emitting. Now, that's no longer emitting infrared, let me tell you. That's past gamma rays. That's up into the temperature limit of neutrons and quarks and anything you can possibly imagine just wandering off. Even the components of the atom wander off from the atom. Nothing can contain it. It's so extraordinary. And all right, I just wanted to tell you that the scientists now are thinking that if there's anything hotter, it's no longer a temperature, and they're thinking that there's something that could be formed from it, and that would be what's known as a black hole formed from heat only, and that's called a Kugelblitz. They've actually named it. I think they had two columns to choose from, and they chose half the word from one column and the other half from another column, and they came up with Kugelblitz.
Actually, it means ball lightning. Kugelblitz means ball lightning in German.
That's clearly where it comes from. It's such an extraordinary number, but when you hear us talking about the Planck length, it's a very small number. It's 1 times 10 to the minus 32, or minus 35, I think minus 35. That's how small it is as a distance. But just knowing, because we're talking about fire and talking about heat, I thought this was like a nice little segue to get that out there. That I think that's really important. That it's something you need to tuck away. It's something you need to understand and remember. And I don't know how I'm going to write that on a rock, Mackie, and whether it's important enough to write that on a rock when civilization is destroyed. Right? That's all I have left in my brain. Yeah? Because I don't know. If you know how to farm, good for you. Come and teach me, right? If you know when I'm supposed to plant carrots, because I don't know. It might have said it on the packet, but now it's 8 months later. I don't even know what day it is. Who was counting? I should have been counting, right? So,
that would be helpful.
so I'm going to write the word Kugelblitz, and I'm going to have 1.41 times 10 to the 32 all written there perfectly in stone for someone else to find, and then not know what on earth any of the numbers mean.
Because that's useful information for anyone.
So
what?
Look, there was nothing else in this week's news outside of the fires, which were pretty bad. Nothing really in...
They were bad.
There was really bad. There was nothing in the news other than there's some politics here and there and some counting that came around and when, who cares. Do you know what? It's nearly Christmas time. It's nearly Thanksgiving. That's like next weekend or something, isn't it, everyone?
Mm-hmm.
So that's coming up. That's your warm-up run for Christmas dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's like in the US. There's 2 times you've got to meet your relatives, and both times can be awkward. This is the one that sort of makes it comfortable to do the second one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll avoid them or worse yet. I can't avoid them both times. Hot dog. Who invented Thanksgiving? It's bad enough to avoid Christmas. But no, I want to go to the States maybe next year when it's Thanksgiving, because we've got relatives there. My wife's family, there's like 50 people or maybe 100 now, I don't know, that live in the States, like all cousins and whatnot, and they're in San Jose, Milpitas area, and they're also in Houston down in Texas. So San Francisco and Houston, you're going to go and have a hopefully Thanksgiving there. But you're right, though, Dave. It's a sort of a dry run, right?
It is. If you're an expatriate of the US living in Australia or anywhere else in the world and listening to this, or if you're currently still living in the US, I'm a big fan of Thanksgiving, and my favorite thing of all time is candied yams.
What's that?
Candied yams.
What's that? Ah, candied yams. Oh, yeah. Yes.
It doesn't quite work the same with sweet potato, I'll tell you. Doesn't quite work the same. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly something to behold, and every Thanksgiving that I don't get to be in the US for, I'm disappointed I'm not having them. So if someone could at least think of me when they're eating it, that'd be great.
That's it. No, look at candied yams, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, there's actually a whole bunch of. I mean, you know what America does well? Bacon. I don't care what. I don't care what anyone else says, or but bacon. If you go to the right place in the States, nicely thick cut bacon, deep fried, like maple wood type thing. With maybe some maple smoked syrup. Oh man, you do bacon well. I went to Guy Fieri's place in Vegas this year on a trip. And he had something called the Pork Emporium, which is like a platter of all kinds of cattle. Yeah, no, exactly right. I couldn't finish it. I couldn't even half finish it. So when I finished, it looked like it just got to my table. It's just. And I said to the waitress, "Does anybody ever finish this?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, people do finish it." And I said to her, "There's a lot of waste, though." She goes, "Yeah, there's a lot of waste. That's a shame, but it was delicious. It was delicious." Just, Guy, if you're listening, or if someone knows Guy, your portions are too large for normal human beings. Okay, just don't. I mean, food wastage is a terrible thing. I mean, or at least make it a share thing. Like on the menu, say that you cannot finish this. Bring a friend. That would be helpful information before you order it. But yeah, bacon is something I really enjoy in the States, and there's every stripe of burger you can imagine. Like I'm not going to mention any specific franchises, but. There's lots, right? And they're really quite good. And I've tried pretty much all of them by now, I think. I also tried the Impossible Burger, which is entirely vegan, I was told, and it fooled me into believing it was meat. So that's a good thing. But today we're going to talk about Resurrection. Man versus Food, my friend. Oh, one of my favorite shows. No, I don't really like the excesses too much, but certainly it's. I love the guy Adam Rich, and there's a new guy now. I forget his name.
Yeah, that's right.
Red-headed fellow. He's pretty funny too. But I
would like to do a Man versus Food tour of some of the best places that he visited. Not to eat those still stupid large things. Just to take the menu on, because boy.
Well, as soon as we're syndicated, Dave, or the History Channel picks us up, we're on there. It's a thing we're going to do.
Someone pass it on to someone that works at one of the places so we can do that.
So get us syndicated, and we have this food. In fact,
and we'll invite you along too, if you can get us syndicated. Right, that's it.
How good is that? But we are going to talk about Resurrection, and Dave gave us a nice segue talking about Christmas and Thanksgiving. Now, of course, Christmas is the time when Christians believe Christ was born. Easter was the time when he was killed and resurrected. It's interesting that the Easter and the Christmas mythology sort of mix, especially around the December 25th mark, when you have the shortest day of the year. In fact, for 3 days the sun stays very, very low, and then on the third day it rises again. That's the winter solstice, and you can see there's a bleed over into the Easter myth. After on the third day. Christ is risen, and in my opinion, you have a transference of mythology from one time of the year into another time of the year. Easter, of course, traditionally being in the northern hemisphere the time of spring, rebirth, renewal, right? And clearly there's a massive overlap between the Christmas and the Easter mythologies, probably the most important Christian holidays, but not only Christian, because the Easter, as well as the winter solstice holiday, if you want to call it that, Christmas holiday, have been around for a lot longer than Christianity has. So the Easter celebrations, the Easter chicken, absolutely. We had a show on this. Look, we're going to probably resurrect that show and bring it to you around Easter time, telling you all about Ishtar and the connections to the Easter mythologies, the pre-Christian Easter mythologies. Have you ever asked yourself why you have an Easter bunny, why you have eggs at Easter? I mean, what does any of that have to do with Christ? I mean, really, nothing. Absolutely nothing. There was not even a chicken or a bunny in the manger that I know of, right? So
I'm sure there's one in the song somewhere. I've got to get going through to my head. Yeah.
I'm sure that's true, right? But that's so there's a lot of pagan imagery, a lot of pagan traditions, and we like to call pagan anyway, or I like to call them pre-Christian traditions that were incorporated into the emerging Christian faith, which became the state religion for the Roman Empire, of course, and that's when the church moved to Rome, lock, stock, and barrel. Before that, the church was almost exclusively in the East. That's where most of the Christians were, the Ionian Islands, what is now Turkey, Asia Minor, places like that. And that's why you have the split of the Eastern and the Western Church as well, between Constantinople and Rome, none of which were founding cities for the Christian faith. That can be firmly laid at the feet of Paul, or Saul, if you want to call him that, Paul the Apostle, who can be... who, in my opinion, actually founded Christianity. It was his letters to the cities. You might do letters to Ephesians and so forth in the Bible, in the New Testament. That's all written by Paul, who survived Christ, of course, and then went on to found, in my opinion, Christianity. 1 minute to go, so please don't go. We are going to talk about resurrection. Dave? Not the other Paul, no. Dave, we're going to talk about resurrection when we come back. We're on page 8. Of 36.
Yeah, that's where I've got it. We're at resurrection.
That will take us right into Christmas. We're going to talk a lot about Christmas and Saturnalia. I think we actually might be able to. Yeah, we definitely will be able to talk about that today, because we will fly through resurrection, I think, Dave, and talk about Christmas and what Christmas really means and what these crazy Christmas traditions are. So donate if you can. This is Listen Up Under the Radio. Whoa, 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 whoa.
See you after the short break, guys. Take the time to donate.
Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff or affiliates.
Welcome back to Dave and Necky's Shining Side Out. And we're talking about resurrection. Thank you very much for joining us again. And this is show number 349. 8? 9.
8, 9, 9. It is 9.
9. Not 8, 9. 9. 9, 40, and 300. 349 shows. So if you're with us doing the math, we are nearing the zenith of our... actually, we have passed the zenith of our 7th year. We are now moving very rapidly to the beginning of our 8th year. In March, I think we should hit it roughly, which means we have completed 7 years almost on the air, and are soon going to our magical 8th year on the line, on the air with Revolution.radio and Nighthawk's Freedom Slips program. A whole bunch of really interesting hosts, a lot of changes, of course, and I think, Dave, I'm not overstating it, but we are one of the few surviving, if you want to call it that, original hosts, because we came online probably 1 year into the show's life, I want to say. Is that about right?
Yeah, it was about a year in.
Yeah, and well, we've been with it ever since. Every Sunday, either Dave or I, or both of us, are here I think we've only ever missed 2 or 3, and then we had either a pre-recorded show or we ran an old show that thematically fit where we were. Now, it's something that, before I go into resurrection, something that I think for our new listeners as well, the shows are structured in such a way that they take you on a journey. And it is the journey that Dave and I, individually and then together, since we've been on the show, have taken in our research and discovery of what we think the world may actually be like. A journey of discovery, a journey of surprises, certainly, and a lot of learning as well. And it has been quite a ride, but it is structured in such a way that you can easily follow it as well. So if you were to go back and if you were to purchase access to the archives at $5.95 US a month, you could do it, at your leisure. We're also on YouTube if you want to find us there, of course. But if you get the $5.95 option, then you get all the other hosts as well. But if you were to do that, you could follow the evolution of our theory, which it's actually a hypothesis. We call it the hypothesis. The hypothesis, and everything feeds into the hypothesis. I'm not going to go into it because it would take the rest of the show and then some. But if you wanted to have a look, see what the hypothesis is all about, go to the big shows like number 100, number 200, number 250, number 300, and have a look at those shows. There should be 4, 5, 6 shows around that mark that deal with the hypothesis and the epiphany as well. But today we are talking about resurrection, which is an anglicized word from the Latin resurrectio, and it is essentially the concept of a living being coming back to life after having expired. It is, these days, mostly a religious concept where it is used in 2 distinct respects. One, a belief in the resurrection of individual souls that is current and ongoing, right? A Christian idealism realized as eschatology, or else a belief in a singular resurrection of the dead event at the end of the world, not like the Walking Dead, but rather a resurrection of the dead to restored to full bodily functions, full body and mind function, not like zombies, but completely restored. Okay, so individual souls being resurrected, Christian idealism, or in fact an event at the end times, where everybody is resurrected and judged, they tell us. Okay, the resurrection of the dead is a standard eschatological belief in the Abrahamic religions, which are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In a number of ancient religions, a life, death, rebirth deity is a deity which dies and resurrects. The death and resurrection of Jesus, of course, is the central focus of Christianity. In fact, it is that event, that single event, and the belief that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and God at the same time, of course, and then that he died and was resurrected. These are the 2 central tenets of the Christian faith. And you also have to believe that he died for your sins. So death was the embodiment of God. He died to wash away our original sin, which was Adam eating the apple, and then was resurrected to sit by the side of his Father in heaven. So this is Christianity boiled down to 3 sentences. There you go. That's it. That's what all you have to know about Christianity. The soul is believed by some to be the divine and immortal part of the human being. And some believe it is the actual vehicle by which people are resurrected. While most Christians believe Jesus' resurrection was in a material body, a small minority believed that resurrection was spiritual, and they're called the Gnostics. They're Gnostics, and in fact, those are the guys, and they're a small minority now because most of them were killed in the Crusades in the 11th and 12th century by what is now called the Catholic Church. And we're talking about the Cathars and the Bogomils and others, the Manichaeans, the Puritans, that believed that Jesus was in fact not resurrected into a material body, which they consider, like we are living in a gross material body, the gross physical world, but rather Jesus was resurrected in his actual spiritual body, still visible to the world, but made of a much subtler and finer substance than our, cumbersome material bodies. But like I said, if you believe that, then chances are that in the 11th and 12th century, they burned you, and they burned your entire town to the ground. There are documented cases, rare in fact, of the return to life of the clinically dead these days, which are classified scientifically as examples of the Lazarus syndrome, a term, of course, which harks back to the biblical story of the resurrection of Lazarus. Dave?
The concept of resurrection is found in the writings of some ancient non-Abrahamic religions in the Middle East. A few extant Egyptian and Canaanite writings allude to dying and rising gods such as Osiris and Baal. Sir James Fraser, in his book, The Golden Bough, relates to these dying and rising gods, but many of his examples, according to various scholars, distort the sources. Taking a more positive position, or Trygve Mettinger argues in his recent book, that the category of rise and return to life is significant for the following deities: Ugaritic, Baal, Melqart, Adonis, Ishmun, Osiris, and Dumuzi. Tell us about the Osiris detail.
Yeah, Osiris is actually really interesting, obviously a Greek deity. The cult of Osiris, who was a god chiefly of regeneration and rebirth, so this is fitting, had a particularly strong interest in the concept of immortality. Plutarch, one of the Roman historians, recounts one version of the myth in which Set, who was Osiris' brother, along with the queen of Ethiopia, conspired with 72, interesting number, accomplices to plot the assassination of Osiris. Set fooled Osiris into getting into a box, which Set then shut, sealed with lead, and threw into the Nile. Sarcophagi were based on the box in this myth, by the way. Osiris' wife, Isis, searched for his remains until she finally found him embedded in a tannin tree trunk. It's a nice tart fruit of the citrus family, in case you're wondering, which was holding up the roof of a palace in Byblos on the Phoenician coast. She managed to remove the coffin and open it, but Osiris, unfortunately, had already expired. In one version of the myth, she used a spell learned from her father and brought him back to life so he could impregnate her. Excuse me. Afterwards, he died again, and she hid his body in the desert. Months later, she gave birth to Horus. While she raised Horus, Set was hunting one night and came across the body of Osiris. Enraged, very angry, he tore the body into 14 pieces and scattered them throughout the land. Isis gathered up all the parts of the body, less the phallus, unfortunately, I guess, which was eaten by a catfish, and bandaged them together for a proper burial. The gods were impressed by the devotion of Isis and resurrected Osiris as the god of the underworld. Because of his death and resurrection, Osiris was associated with the flooding and retreating of the Nile, and thus the crops along the Nile Valley, Dave.
Lemminkainen, the Finnish pronunciation. Mackie, you might take that for me.
Lemminki. That's
Nice.
exactly, it's just phonetic. It's what you said. It's exactly what you said.
Right. Okay. Is a prominent figure in Finnish mythology. He is one of the heroes of the Kalevala, where his character is a composition of several separate heroes of oral poetry. He is usually depicted as a young and good-looking with wavy red hair. The original mythology is a shamanistic figure in the Kalevala. He has been blended together with epic war heroes, or Korkumineli, Korkumainen, and Arti Serelainen.
Nice.
Nice, good luck. In one myth, he drowns in the river of Tunela, the underworld, in trying to capture or kill the black swan that lives there as part of an attempt, as Ilmarinen once made, to win a daughter of Lahus as his wife. In a tale somewhat reminiscent of Isis' search for Osiris, his mother searches heaven and earth to find her son. Finally, she learns of his fate and asks Ilmarinen to fashion her a rake of copper with which to dredge her son's body from the river of Tunela. Thus equipped, she descends into the underworld in search of a son. On the banks of the river of the underworld, she rakes up first Lemminki's, Canaan's tunic and shoes, and then his maimed and broken body. Unrelenting, she continues her work until every piece of his body is recovered. Sewing the parts together and offering prayers to the gods, the mother tries to restore his life, but while she succeeds in remaking his body, his life is still absent. Then she entreats a bee to ascend to the halls of the over-god Ukku and fetch from there a drop of honey as ointment that would bring him back to life. Only with such a potent remedy is the hero finally restored.
No, interesting, right? Which brings us to Golvik. Golvik. In Norse mythology, Golvik is a being who was speared by the Aesir, burned 3 times, and yet thrice reborn. Upon her 3rd rebirth, Golvik's name becomes Hader, and she is described as a knowledgeable and skillful Völva. Golvik Hader, the same person, is solely attested in the Poetic Edda, compiled in the 13th century from earlier traditional material. Scholars have variously proposed that Golvik Hader is the same figure as the goddess Freya, that Golvik's death may have been connected to corruption by way of gold among the Aesir, and or that Golvik's treatment by the Aesir may have led to the Aesir-Vanir War.
Now, ancient Greek religion, for instance, in ancient Greek religion, a number of men and women who were made physically immortal as they were resurrected from the dead, and there's this Asclepius was killed by Zeus only to be resurrected and transformed into a major deity. Achilles, after being killed, was snatched from his funeral pyre by his divine mother. Thetis and resurrected, brought to an immortal existence in either Elysian plains or Island of the Blessed, Memnon, who was killed by Achilles, seems to have received a similar fate. Alcmene, Castor, Heracles, and Melicertes were also among figures sometimes considered to have been resurrected to physical immortality. According to Herodotus' histories, the 7th century BC sage Aristeas of Proconnesus was first found dead, after which his body disappeared from a locked room. Hang on, this sounds reminiscent of another story. Later he found not only to have been resurrected, but to have gained immortality. Mackie, that sounds like the story of Christ, doesn't it?
It actually does, completely, which is interesting, right?
Yeah. This is how this is how stories get formed, right? So we know
Well, that's
know
exactly.
a lot of the Mediterranean gods all had the same weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Different names, same function.
Yep.
Just different names, same weapon. While they appeared completely different, they still had a common father, and there was usually 3 sons or something equivalent to that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is extraordinary.
There's a lot of overlap in the mythologies, and I think we have spent some time on it. We're going to spend some time on it again in the future, because I don't think we've explored this to its full depth, the topic at least. And it's important that we do this, because all of the stories that we are told today, and then we take as part of our culture, if you will, they didn't necessarily start with us. Okay, a lot of the stories we're told, a lot of the mythology, a lot of the articles of faith that we all believe in, or no, not as the case may be, were brought to us by cultures no longer in existence, with their cultural artifacts, which have survived through time because they were deemed sufficiently important. Like some of these stories are archetypes, heroical archetypes, in some instances, or just having a very strong moral implications. I mean, a lot of the stories that are surviving throughout the ages, thousands, tens of thousands of years, they do so because there's a lot to that story, right? And sometimes there's this grain of knowledge that people are trying to transmit. And it's the same with this, as Dave has pointed out. Hinduism, of course, is no slouch when it comes to resurrection. The 7th century Hindu saint Sambanda prays to Shiva and resurrects Pumpavai from an urn of bones and ashes in old Kapaleshwara temple at the location of the current St. Thome Basilica, apparently. So, but it's a lot more common to find stories of reincarnation rather than resurrection in Hinduism.
Well, look, the same can be said for Judaism, because there are 3 explicit examples in the Hebrew Bible of people being resurrected from the dead. I mean, there was the prophet Elijah. He prays for God raises a young boy from death. Elisha raises the son of the Shunammite woman. This was the very same child whose birth he previously foretold. And then as a dead man's body was thrown into the dead Elisha's tomb, is resurrected when the body touches Elisha's bones.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
It is. It's very interesting, though. I mean, there's a lot of stories. So again, I hate to dampen the mood, but the resurrection of Christ, which is such a miracle, and it's again, I get a lot of hate for this. That's okay, I get it. It's touted as such a wonderful occasion and miracle, and resurrections as a theme, as a thing, as a historical fact for most people, wasn't that big a deal. I mean, it happened. People go, yeah, well, some of them get resurrected. The gods bring them back to life, whatever the case may be. So the resurrection of Christ was right along, in line with all of those stories. Yeah, the big difference, of course, is that if you're a Christian, you believe that Jesus Christ is in fact the Son of God, and his death was in fact the thing that washed away our original sin, and we now are allowed to, get back into the of heaven through him, or at least that's the article of faith. But the resurrection thing itself is not that amazing. I mean, there's Dave and I are going to take you through this example here one by one. There's a whole bunch of stuff that predates Jesus Christ by thousands of years in the Old Testament. There was the widow of Zarephath's son. This is from the book of Kings. Elijah was a great prophet. He was sent by God to the widow of Zarephath. Her son got sick and died. Elijah went up to the boy's room in the loft. He laid himself over the boy's body 3 times and then prayed that God would allow the boy's soul to come back into him. The boy was raised from the dead. So that's the detail of the things we just mentioned. Dave?
This is Shunammite's son, Elisha, stayed in Shunem with a woman and her husband whenever he passed through their town. In fact, the couple built an extra room in their house for Elisha to use. Elisha wanted to give the woman something for her hospitality. He promised she would have a son in a year's time. She did have a son. He got a terrible headache and died. The woman put the boy on Elisha's bed and went to get Elisha. When Elisha had arrived, he prayed, he laid himself over the boy's body, and he paced back and forth in the house. The boy came back to life.
A man was tossed into Elisha's tomb. Again, this is from Kings. People were about to bury a man when they saw a band of raiders coming. They simply threw the dead man's body into Elisha's tomb. The Bible says when the corpse touched Elisha's bones, he revived.
Okay, a widow of Nain's son. Jesus stopped a funeral procession as they were carrying the casket to the cemetery. Jesus had compassion on the weeping mother. He told her to stop crying, and then he raised her son from the dead.
Yep, this was from Luke, and this one is from Mark. Jairus asked Jesus to come heal his dying daughter. By the time Jesus arrived, she had already passed away. Jesus sent the mourners out, but took the girl's parents and Peter, James, and John into the room where the dead girl lay. He said, "Little girl, get up," and she did.
Wow. Lazarus had been in the grave 4 days when Jesus approached his tomb. Jesus asked the people to take away the stone. Then Jesus called out, "Lazarus, come forth." Lazarus came out, still wrapped in the strips of cloth. People had to help him out of them.
Tabitha, this is from Acts, was a seamstress who did many good deeds. She got sick and died. Since Peter was in a nearby town, they asked him to come. Peter had everyone leave the room where Tabitha lay. He knelt down and prayed, and then he said to the body, "Tabitha, arise." She opened her eyes and then sat up. That's Peter, by the way. All right.
Oh, right. Okay. Eutychus. Late one night, Paul was speaking to a group of believers. A young man was sitting in the window listening. He fell asleep and fell from the 3rd story to his death. Paul ran down, laid himself over the body, and embraced him. He told everyone the boy was okay, and he was.
And the final story of resurrection in the Bible comes from Matthew. When Jesus died, there was a violent earthquake, and the veil in the temple was torn from top to bottom. The Bible says tombs were opened and many bodies of saints arose from the dead. It says that after Jesus' resurrection, they went into Jerusalem, where many people witnessed their return to life. So there was like a sweeping resurrection of different prophets, I guess, or saints, as Jesus was resurrected. It's interesting, isn't it? So a whole bunch of people came alive at that time as well. So that concludes our discussion around resurrection and the historical, mythological, cultural artifacts we have all been taught. How much truth is there? Well, who knows? It's very difficult to say. But the stories are brought down to us. I mean, sometimes maybe someone was misidentified, maybe as being dead. We discussed, I think, about a couple of weeks ago, how hard it is to determine the state of death. It's not easy to actually determine when somebody is dead these days. I mean, is it brain dead? Is it when the heart stops? What actually signifies death? It's a really tough call for a lot of doctors to make. A lot easier back in the olden days. Stop moving, don't breathe. You're dead, but may not be dead. So some people woke up. But Dave, the stories, especially in I guess Dickensian London, of people that were buried alive. So, in fact, so much so that people would install a two-way communication system like on a ship, to call, exactly, the bell. There you go, exactly, the bell to call out, and they used the bell to let people know, hey, I'm actually not dead, and then they would, I guess, come and dig you up again. So it was quite a common occurrence for people to be misdiagnosed. Can we dismiss the resurrection notion, though? No, we can't dismiss it because we just don't know, right? We can't dismiss it. And if you think about it logically for a second, I mean, the human body is a biological machine. I'm talking about the body only, right? The chemical processes, there's physiology, there's a whole bunch of stuff involved to make it go. And sometimes these things break. If you are a body mechanic, let's say, right, a really good doctor, then you can fix it and you make it go again, especially if you've got really advanced science. And this is where sort of our intervention comes in as well. And if you can keep the body going and repair it, as it were, there's no reason why people can't come from what had been previously the dead. You can absolutely restore life again to someone who has deceased. It's theoretically possible, at least. I mean, our science today, at least our imagination, is almost limitless. And in fact, what we can do these days is approaching almost limitless. Yeah. It's a fascinating concept, which brings us to the Christmas traditions around the world. Now, you might think this is incongruous. What's the connection here, Mackie? Well, the connection is that Christmas is misunderstood as is Easter. So we'll have a show on Easter as well. And the reason we have to talk about Christmas and Easter and so forth in the context of death and resurrection is because that's exactly what it deals with, death and resurrection. Right? We talk about the winter solstice, the death and rebirth of the sun. The death, rather the birth of Christ, December 25th, and then the death and rebirth of Christ around Easter time, which is interesting because the winter solstice is a fixed date in the calendar. Yeah, whereas Easter is a moving feast. So you've got one Christian high holiday, Christmas, a fixed date every year, right? That's December, 25th. That's what it is. And then you've got Easter, a moving feast, another, like the two highest, arguably, festivals or holidays in the Christian calendar. One fixed, one a moving feast, which means one is tied to the solar calendar, makes sense because it's the summer solstice, and the other is tied to the lunar calendar, and that's why it moves with the lunar cycles. Again, it actually has survived from what I like to call pre-Christian times. Yeah. Okay. Again, yeah, a lot of hate. I feel it already in my bones. But we need to understand all the context. There's nothing worse than getting into an argument with anyone and not understanding the context of what it is you're talking about. You must understand the context. It is imperative that you understand the context, right? So you can believe whatever you like, and that's your good right, but please take the time to learn the facts.
Everything needs electrolytes, Mackie.
Everything needs electrolytes. Underwear first. Underwear always first. But okay, let's talk about these different Christmas traditions around the world, because this is the important thing. So we're calling them Christmas traditions. They're not Christmas traditions. They are the winter solstice. They're the winter solstice. These are winter festivals that are observed in December. Okay, there's Krampus. I'll take this one because you probably have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Krampusnacht. It's celebrated on December 6th. It's the feast of St. Nicholas, and it's celebrated in parts of Europe, right? In Alpine countries, St. Nicholas has a devilish companion named Krampus. Now, just on that, when I was a child, on December 6th, I would put out my little boot, and it would be filled with goodies. This is St. Nicholas Day. We would celebrate it in Cologne. And it would be a precursor to Christmas, of course, like a completely separate feast, though. So this was part of my tradition, my growth, right, as a person. Dave.
So the Booty Day, 8th of December, Day of Enlightenment, celebrating that day, the day that the historical Buddha, the Shakyamuni or Siddhartha Gautama experienced enlightenment, also known as Buddhi.
Yeah. Simply the actual winter solstice, which was celebrated by the pre-Christian Europeans, not just though, but certainly by the pre-Christian Europeans, which was December 21 and 22nd, midwinter, the winter solstice.
There's the Dongzhi Festival, a celebration of winter. The festival, or Winter Solstice Festival, this is the Chinese pinyin, Dongzhi. See, I got it in the end. Literally, yes. The arrival of winter is one of the most important festivals celebrated by the Chinese and other East Asians during the Dongzhi solar term, winter solstice, or on or around December 22nd. See, it's the same, it's the Northern Hemisphere thing. In 2013, the festival falls on Sunday, December 22nd. The origins of the festival can be traced back to the yin and the yang philosophy of balance and harmony in the cosmos. After this celebration, there will be days with longer daylight hours and therefore an increase in positive energy flowing in.
That's right. Now we're jumping across the Atlantic. Well, actually, since we're in China, we're jumping across the Pacific. It's just a longer jump. To the Soyal, yeah. Bing, good jump. Safe landing. December 21st, the Zuni and Hopi Zoyal is the winter solstice ceremony of the Zuni and the Hopi, the peaceful ones, also known as the Hopi Indians. It is held on December 21, the shortest day of the year. The main pola of the ritual is the ceremonially bring the sun back from its long winter slumber. It also marks the beginning of another cycle of the wheel of the year, and it is a time for purification. So pause for a second. So we have Krampusnacht, December 6th. Then we have the Bodhi Day, which is celebrated obviously in the Buddhist culture, right? Day of December 8th. Then we get the winter solstice. Yeah. Then we get the Dongzhi Festival, also winter solstice, in Asia, China. Then we jump across the Pacific to North America. The Hopis are celebrating the Soyal, which is also December 21, winter solstice. Dave, what's the next one?
Yalda. That's the 22nd of December. What a coincidence. The turning point, the winter solstice, as the longest night of the year and the beginning of the lengthening of days. Shabe Yolda, or Shabe Shele, is an Iranian festival celebrating the victory of light and goodness over darkness and evil. Shabe Yolda means birthday eve. According to Persian mythology, is this the same one? Mithra was born at dawn on the 22nd of December to a virgin mother. He symbolizes light, truth, goodness, strength, and friendship. Herodotus reports that this was the most important holiday of the year for contemporary Persians. In modern times, Persians celebrate Yolda by staying up late or all night, a practice known as Shaba Shera, meaning night gazing. Fruits and nuts are eaten, especially pomegranates and watermelons, whose red colour invokes the crimson hues of dawn and symbolizes Mithra.
That's right. You also have the Modranit, which is or Mother's Night, which was the Saxon winter solstice festival, also of course on the 21st and 22nd of December.
Now, Mackie, you already mentioned Saturnalia. That's the Roman winter solstice festival.
That is correct. Which is in fact the most likely candidate to have to be the precursor for our Christmas celebrations, right? Because don't forget. So what happened? I need to spend a little bit of time, on this. So what happened is Christianity became the state religion of Rome by decree. The emperor said, we used to throw the Christians into the circus and have them eaten by the lions. That was all good fun. That's going to stop now. We're all going to be Christians. It was a politically expedient move for the emperor. You know, it made sense. There was a lot of it was a massive it was seen as a massive stabilizing effect for the empire, for the most part, and that's when the Christian religion, if you will, moved into Rome, at least the Western Roman Church. What had happened, interestingly enough, the Roman Empire broke up into Eastern Rome and Western Rome. So East Rome, if you want to call it that, was ruled out of then Constantinople, which is now Istanbul or Byzantium, what are you going to call it? And Western Rome, of course, was Rome itself, and that's where Catholicism found its footing. Whereas, of course, in the East, in Constantinople, we have what is now called Orthodox or Eastern Christianity, which is also practiced in Russia, in Greece. So Russia and Greece are probably the most prominent surviving churches of the Eastern Roman Church. Now, as the church grew, and the church is the older of the two churches, the Western Roman Church is younger, so the Roman Catholic Church is younger than the Eastern Church. The Romans took on, you know, worship of Christ. That was all goodness, but they also had a pantheon of gods, right? And they also had a whole bunch of festivals. And in fact, we see this as Christianity permeates into Europe. A lot of the pre-Christian festivals are simply absorbed into the growing Christian Roman Empire. You know, it's, oh yeah, you celebrate December 25th. We celebrate December 25th. There's no change for you. Easter. We've got a fertility festival on Easter. We have a fertility festival on Easter. See,
what
it's
a
easy.
coincidence.
Coinky dinky. That's what it's goodness. Come on, just join up. Just come along. Come along. And they did sometimes. Interestingly, you know, the pantheon of the Roman god made a smooth or somewhat smooth transition into what is now called the, I guess, I don't know, what you call it, the Assembly of the Saints, maybe, if you wanted to call it that. So the Romans had a god or goddess for almost everything, right? Any transaction, any natural event, any activity that you can think of, there'd be a Roman god in charge. And, you know, most of the Roman gods had been, you know, I guess, taken on from the Greek pantheon, you know, like Jupiter, Zeus, and sort of, and Mars is Ares, and so on and so forth, right? So that's Romanized, right? And then they had a god for everything, which was, you know, very neat. Because if you got a specific request, you just pray to that specific god. Because they figured, well, you know, I mean, these guys are busy, these gods. So it's better to have some, you know, gods in charge of certain things, and they can focus on their particular portfolio, as it were. And it must have been really hard for the Romans to accept Christianity, because there was all of a sudden there was one god. Oh, it's a busy guy. Far out. I mean, how is he going to get to me? They were thinking. I mean, you know, I mean, there's so many of us. I mean, I used to pray to Ares, and I used to pray to Mars. If I'm a Roman, I pray to Mars. I pray to Jupiter, you know, and Venus, and you know, I get things done. You know, that's goodness, right? But now just to one dude, really? And this was probably very hard for the Romans to come to terms with, right? So what they did, surreptitiously over time, the saints took on the portfolio of the erstwhile gods. You know, so you've got the saint now. If you look at the Catholic, and I can't call it the pantheon, if you look at the Catholic Assembly of the Saints, there's a saint for almost every activity, okay? So all the old portfolios that the gods held have been taken on by the saints. So to the point, in fact, that Roman Catholics pray to the saints. They pray to the saints. Now, color me naive, but doesn't the Bible say, "For I am a jealous God, there shall be no other gods beside me, and you must come through me, or rather, you must come to me through my Son. There's no other way," and so on and so forth. But you know, the Catholics have found a way to, I guess, dilute the message a little and pray to the saints. completely unchristian. If you think about it, it is just not done. In fact, when the Israelites wanted to do this, they had this golden calf. I don't know if you remember this, right? They built this golden calf. They were praying to the golden calf, and God wasn't happy. This is not good. You got to do something about that. And then so Moses came down with the tablets and said, hey, they can't do that, and he destroyed the golden calf. And God, the Christian God, the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament, is a jealous God. It's not a God that likes to share the limelight. So praying to the saints in that light is direct blasphemy. Ooh, there's a lot of hate I'm getting. I'm getting the vibe. My internet hate is bigger than yours, Dave. But so this is just a little bit of an insight into what in my mind has in fact happened. But Dave, tell me about the next thing, which is interesting.
That's the Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, day of the birth of the unconquered sun, late Roman Empire, and guess what day that falls on? The 25th of December.
Boom! Now, this is interesting because we actually do this in Australia. It's called the Yule Festival, Yule. Mm-hmm. And it's a pagan, or like I like to say, pre-Christian winter festival that was celebrated by the historical Germanic people from late December to early January. Once again, in line with the Northern Hemisphere winter solstice.
So the Malkla 25th of December is a festival gifted to the dealer Malk in Vainach mythology. The 25th of December was the birthday and the festival of the sun. You might know it as a symbol that looks somewhat like the cross with threes coming off each corner in the angled a little bit from point to point. So it's a symmetrical cross. It looks like the swastika, but rather than them being at right angles, they're at 45 degree, and they're the shape of like a 3. It looks more naturally like a plant, somewhat. The actual people of the North Caucasus include the modern Chechens and Ingush, who today predominantly practice Islam. Nevertheless, their folklore has preserved a substantial amount of information about their pre-Islamic pagan beliefs.
Also, like everywhere else. Exactly,
yeah,
Dave.
That's right.
Exactly. And that's really the point here, right? So we like to think of these things in very clinical, very scientific, very finite terms. So the year 0, Christianity starts, right? Boom, just like that, right? This is the school teaching that we've all had. And I'm not saying that all of our listeners think like that. Of course you don't, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to us here. My point is that it doesn't work like that. It's not clear cut. There are transitional periods. In fact, the year 0 is a myth in itself. There's no year 0. I mean, people didn't stop. Oh, it's year 0. Whoops, let's start counting. That's insanity.
What are we going to count again?
What?
Yeah.
We had a perfectly cromulent calendar before. It just isn't like that, right? I mean, but that's, of course, that's what we've been indoctrinated to believe. Not so. Not the case. Not at all. These are all transition. In fact, we are still in a transitional. In fact, there never is a state of existence that isn't transitional. We are constantly shifting and changing. Our culture changes. Our values change. Everything changes. Right? The climate changes. Boom! There you go. Full circle. But it is really important to understand that this is not a static environment, you know, and of course things survive, right? And just as pagan, or I'm going to call it pagan because I'm going to talk about Islamic belief as well in a second. Just because pagan artifacts have survived in Christianity doesn't mean they're invalid, because they've also survived in Islamic belief systems, the pagan beliefs, the pre-Islamic pagans, the pre-Christian pagans, the pre-Judaistic pagans, if you want to call them that. Okay, the people that came before the Abrahamic religion. Yeah? Even Hinduism started at some point, but there was something that came before. Buddhism, there was something that came before. Okay, Zoroastrianism. You can go back as back as far as you want. It doesn't matter how far back you go. There was something that came before it. Yeah, and we have lost so much knowledge. Think of all the books that were burned just in Alexandria. And that was just one example. We lost books all over the world. The Catholic Church destroyed thousands of books in South America. We lost untold manuscripts in China, through the vanity of emperors that wanted time to begin with them. Oh, time starts with me. Everything before me, burn it. Yes, that happened. That happened. What? Absolutely, it happened. This is the insanity of it, right? We don't know what we have lost. We have no idea. We know that we lost a whole bunch because we can no longer build the pyramids, but there they are. We can no longer move 1,000-ton blocks of stone. In fact, we wouldn't, because why? But someone did, right? Someone did. It's there. You can't argue with it. It's in front of you. Here it is. There it is.
Mackie, your boss goes, we're going to move 1,000-ton stone. I'm going to go, good luck with that.
And I'll be working for someone else now.
Yeah.
Right? Seriously? What? So this is really the issue that we're dealing with here. There's no good. How can I put this best? There's no good time to start looking at as the starting point of time. There's no starting point of time. There just isn't. Everything is always in flux, and if we understand this, we will be a lot better equipped to deal with today. You really should understand what went before to talk about today, to talk to anyone today. I think it's important to do that, right? Because guess what? If you don't do that, if you don't understand, you're just bound to make a whole bunch of mistakes that probably someone else made before you. Is that really what you want to do? Right? Not only that, you're also uninformed. And uninformed people usually look foolish. Right? If you're in an argument with someone and you have really no idea what you're talking about, you're probably going to look like an idiot. Right? Nobody wants to look like that. Nobody wants to feel like they don't know what they're talking about. Right? So inform yourself, learn. It's not that hard. At least a little bit, scratch. Right? And again, you're listening to this show. I'm talking to the choir. Right, I'm preaching to the choir, which is why you're here. You want to hear about these things. You want to know. You want to learn about this stuff, right? And some of it is hard to learn. Some of it hard to find, Dave. This research isn't easy. Some of it might take you down paths that you rather not know about. Mm-hmm. I've learned a whole bunch of stuff I'd rather not know. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Okay, our research has led us down some very dark tunnels. Okay, some very dark pathways that I feel that I'm unwilling to explore further because of fear of my safety. Mm-hmm. To be completely frank with you. Other things we just don't mention because we don't know. I could talk about until the cows come home about all kinds of things without knowing what I'm talking about. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather give you guys something concrete. Something that you can, hang your hat on. Okay, well, what Dave and Mackie said. Okay, there's something solid behind it. And I promise you, we do the research, and to the best of our knowledge, the things we tell you are the best information available at this point. They still have our view on it, of course. So I urge you to form your own view, do your own research as well, be informed, become a fully actualized human being. That'd be nice, right? To be completely responsible for your actions, as well as understanding those actions, as well as being informed to understand those actions and make them and take them and make good decisions. That's a good idea. Let's all make good decisions, right, Dave? Let's all make good decisions. it's I don't know. Which brings us to the final one, which is Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a Jewish festival celebrating the miracle of light. Again, around this time, the December time frame, Hanukkah. We're very close, I think, to the end. 3 minutes, Dave tells me. Mm-hmm. So next week we're going to talk about Christmas. So this is where we're going to get into the meat. It's only a few weeks to Christmas. Only a few weeks to Christmas, and there's a lot of information you might find interesting about Christmas. I mean, why do you have a tree? Why is there a tree? Why does Santa Claus look the way that Santa Claus does? Right? I mean, these are good questions. Very good questions. Gifts. What about gifts? You know, what about a feast? Right? And how many different versions of Santa Claus are there? A lot.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot.
Right? So, in fact, why do we call him Santa Claus? Why in Germany he's called Christmasman, Weihnachtsmann, or Christkind. Christkind actually means Christ child or child Christ, right? So it's again, so in Germany the Weihnachtsmann, which is I guess the Christmasman, as well as Christkind, which is again the Christ child. There's no Santa Claus per se. Santa Claus is celebrated on
Kringle too,
December
isn't
6th.
there?
Yeah, exactly. There's Kris Kringle as well. I mean, there's Aschenklaus, Wuklaus, Pelznickel.
And
right?
the
There's a whole...
giving man from the moon in Japan.
Exactly. Exactly right. Exactly right. It is a real treasure trove of different things, all related to Christmas. That's why I believe that this period of time, December 20th to 25th, let's call it, right? And it has been celebrated for thousands and thousands of years. I think the music has started, so I hope everybody had a good time on the show, and hopefully we'll talk to you next week of different things.
No, the music has not started yet.
All related. Oh, okay,
very
great.
close. Almost.
We can almost start. But look, Dave, yeah, look, listen to Fun and Radio. Hopefully you can donate some money. I mean, Nighthawk does an awesome job running the show. None of the hosts get paid. There are no corporate messages coming, through the airways or the digital cables.
There's no dictation here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Absolutely, 100% correct. Yeah, we say whatever we like to say.
and that we do. So, look, donate with the station. If you would care to receive a gift in return, check out the station's website for details and ensure your customers allow you to import the item of your choice. No dictation. And there's the music. We'll see you next week for show 350. Take care and stay tuned for a roundtable with Jer Bear.